The Powers Project.
Jeff, how you doing today, sir?
Oh, great, Kurt. How are you?
I'm doing great. I want to tell you, I was really looking forward to having you on the show after I heard about your story. Your story is incredible. It's tragic. It's amazing. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's just something that you see in movies and you go, "Oh, that doesn't happen in real life," and yet this was your life. Um, I'm going to give the listeners and the viewers just a little bit of background. You were 17 years old when you were accused of rape and murder of a classmate, and you spent 16 years in prison for a crime that you did not commit. And the story, I mean, that's just the beginning of the story, and the tragedy of it all, of how it affected, I mean, not just your life, but the life of your classmate who when you tell this story, they're going to see just how tragic this becomes. But all these the different families and the friends of all of you that were turned upside down because of what happened. Um, I'd like for you to tell your story. Like, how did the police, when this all happened, just you had a classmate who was raped and murdered, how did the police go, Jeff, you're our guy?
Sure. And yeah, I was 16 when I was arrested. I would turn 17 by the time the trial started.
Oh, okay.
So the year was 1989. It was in Peekskill in Westchester County, New York. It was the suburbs, middle class, ethnically diverse. And as you correctly say, a classmate, Angela Correa, who was a immigrant from Colombia. She'd been in the country about a year and a half. She uh, really lived a sheltered life, as I understood it. She never went anywhere unless she was accompanied by her older sister or her parents. I knew her name. She knew mine. That was really the extent of it. She was in two of my classes as a freshman and one as a sophomore, but we were really not even on a high-by basis. And one of her classes was photography class, and the teacher assigned her to, and everyone else in the class, to take some pictures of foliage. He instituted a buddy system, and there was by which male students were matched up with female students. And the male student assigned to her actually turned up, played hooky on the assignment. And so she went home with her sister, and her sister went to the restroom. And when she came out, for some reason, Angela had just left and went to the park to take the pictures. And while she was on the park, she met a drug addict who was high, who attacked, murdered, and raped her. So her body went missing on November 15th. And then her body was found several days later, November 17th, 1989. She was found naked from the waist down. So murders were pretty unusual in Peekskill. So this really kind of brought everything to a halt. I mean, parents were bringing their children straight to school and then showing back up at the end of the school day and bringing them straight home. There were town hall meetings that were held regarding updates on the investigation, safety tips, and there was a general atmosphere of fear, rumor, and paranoia. So there were all those factors and all those pressures on the police to solve the crime. They also had the state police breathing down their neck. I mean, the victim's family didn't think the Peekskill Police Department had enough experience, or they knew what was doing. So they asked the state police to take over the investigation, which they did not take it over, but they did tell the Peekskill Police that the family went to them. So it's an additional pressure on them. So in terms of how I got on the police radar, the police interviewed a lot of students from the high school, and some of them told the police that they might want to speak to me because I was quiet. I was to myself. So I guess their underlying thoughts were that people who commit violent crimes are loners. I guess that's what the thought process was. So I got on their radar through that. But then also, I was a teenager. I was 16, and this was really my first brush with death, and I had an emotional reaction to it, and the police thought that reaction was suspicious. They got a psychological profile from the NYPD, which claimed to have the psychological characteristics of the actual perpetrator, and I had the misfortune of matching that.
So even though you only knew her on a high buy type basis, her death still affected you to where it, I mean, obviously you were distraught over it.
Yeah, I mean, we were not even really on a high pie basis, but yeah, it's still, even though we barely interacted with each other at all, it still affected me. Yeah, it did.
Because it was your first, was this your really first interaction with death where you knew somebody?
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. But in addition to that, yes, that's true. But another factor that I wanted to mention is, is that after she was buried, I mean, there was a general invitation made to anybody who was there if they wanted to come back to the family's house and have, coffee and pastries. And so, I took them up on that invitation, and I saw in the house that they still had kept the bedroom in the same exact condition that it was when when everything happened to her. So that kind of brought it to life a little bit more.
So because you're basically a loner and a quiet kid, and because
Mhm.
you had emotional reaction to the death of somebody who you weren't necessarily close to, but it was your first brush with knowing somebody who had died, the police automatically honed in on you
That's right.
with no other evidence, just the fact that you're a loner, you're quiet, and you happen to show up and you were crying at.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Okay. So did they at any time while they were looking at you have other suspects that they were looking at, or did they just hone in on you completely, thinking that you had to be the person?
Well, I was their third suspect. I mean, initially they looked at the victim's stepfather because they said that that's the first place that they look, but when he hired a retired NYPD detective to investigate, they kind of moved on from him. Then they went to a different classmate. They said that they found a note under her hand which referenced his first name and referenced that, that his eyes jump out at you, and he had green eyes, and so I guess that's what they made the leap to think, to speak with him. So he was a suspect, and they started trying some of the same tactics on him that they later did on me, interrogation wise. But he had a stepfather in the home that, broke up the interrogation and got a stepson an attorney, so from there they moved on from him to me.
Okay, so when they moved on to you, then they took you in for questioning. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Did you have your parents with you at the time?
I did not.
So they questioned you without your parents' consent. And what was the questioning like? I mean, did they ask you just a few questions, let you go? I mean, what were the tactics that they used to question you?
Yeah, so firstly, they intercepted me on my way to the high school. I mean, I lived across the street from the high school. It was just up the hill and across the street. So it wasn't hard to figure out which route I was likely to take to go to the high school. So they were waiting for me in an unmarked car, just, right adjacent to the high school. And these two plainclothes detectives came out of their car when they saw me, and they called my name, and eventually they convinced me that they actually were police officers, because that was around the time when there was the big public education, don't talk to strangers, don't get in a stranger's car, that kind of thing. And they told me that they wanted me to come down to the police station. They wanted me to help them, in the Korea investigation. And I told them, well, I don't know anything. I don't see how I could be helpful. And they told me they wanted me to come down there anyway. And eventually they persuaded me to go to the police station. So I was there maybe from 9 o'clock to like 1:30 in the afternoon, approximately. So in terms of how the questioning was, I mean, it started out, they were talking to me as a suspect, and they kept asking me the same questions and accusing me of the crime. But then when I went to get up and leave, and they told me, they said, well, how is that going to look if you get up and storm out of here? And so I sat back down, and then they started talking to me, like pretending like they needed my help to solve the crime.
Mm.
And that really was kind of characteristics of all of my interactions with the police over the next 6 weeks. I told my mother about the initial interaction with the police, and she told me she didn't want me to speak to them any further. But after that, though, I had a lot of interaction with the police over the next 6 weeks, and she didn't know about any of it. I mean, I really was raised. The police are our friends; they're there to help, and I knew I hadn't done anything, and they're saying they wanted my help. So, what could really go wrong? Why should I not chat with them? So that was what my thinking was, and so that dynamic happened in all those meetings where they would first talk to me as a suspect, and then Jeff as this junior detective helper theme was developed. And so they would fall back on that. And I was susceptible to that because prior to being a teenager, I wanted to be a cop when I did grow up. And, they did the good cop, bad cop technique. And, one of the officers pretended to be my friend. I came to look at him as a father figure because my father had never been involved in my life in any aspect.
Did they use the tactics that we so often hear about where they keep you, for hours and not feed you and deprive you of sleep and then, you know, tell you that they have evidence that you did it or things like that? Did they try to convince you that they knew that for a fact that you did it?
Yeah, but most of those things happened the day of the coerced false confession. I mean, here and there, they were, up until that day, here and there, they would try to get me to, they would accuse me of the crime verbally and try to get a reaction and try to get me to admit it. But again, when they would push a little too hard and I would become frightened and they would see that, that's when they would switch it up. And Jeff as this junior detective helper theme was what they pushed. So eventually they got me to agree to take this test. They told me, we got some new information in the file and that's going to allow you to be more helpful to us. But first you have to take and pass a polygraph. So the next day, rather than report to the school, I went to the police station for the test. My mother and grandmother thought that I was in school, so they didn't call around looking for me. They drove me to the town of Brewster, which is in Putnam County, whereas I was from Peekskill in Westchester County. So it was about 40 minutes away by car. And that meant I could, I rode there in the vehicle with the officer pretending to be my friend, and the other two cops from Peekskill were in a different car. And so 40 minutes away by car, I was totally dependent upon the police. I had no idea where I was. And the polygraphist was a Putnam County Sheriff's investigator. He was dressed like a civilian, and he pretended not to be a cop. He gave me a 4-page brochure which explained how the polygraph worked, but I had a lot of big words in it that I didn't understand. But then I figured, well, I'm there to help the police, so what does it matter? Let's just get on with it. Then I didn't have an attorney present. They didn't give me anything to eat. He brought me to the small room and gave me 6 or 7 cups of coffee. Gave me nervous. Then he attached me to the machine, and then he launched into his third-degree tactics. So he invaded my personal space. He raised his voice at me. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again. And he kept that up for 6.5 to 7 hours. Towards the end, he said, what do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test result that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it. And when he said that to me, that really shot my fear to the roof. And then the cop pretended to be my friend. He came in the room and told me the other officers were going to harm me, but that he'd holding them off. We couldn't do so any longer, that I had to help myself. Then he said, look, just tell them what they want to hear. You go home. You're not going to be arrested. So being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, not thinking about the long term, instead just being concerned with my safety in the moment. I was in fear of my life. The fact I didn't know where I was and no one else did either loomed quite large. And the possibility of harm, this false promise. So I made up a story based on the information which he had given me in the course of the interrogation. By the time everything was said and done, I collapsed on the floor in a fetal position. I was crying uncontrollably. Obviously, I was arrested. I was charged with a murder and rape.
Okay, so I know you wouldn't have known this at the time because you were a kid, but
Right.
how does that confession even get allowed into court since you didn't have an adult there that gave the okay for you to see the police, and you didn't have a lawyer representing you either? So all of this was done to a minor underage. How would that even been allowed into court? I don't understand how that was how your attorney allowed that to happen.
Well, if you're 16 years old, you're allowed to you're allowed to waive your rights and speak to the police without an attorney present, without an adult present.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. I
But
thought until you were 18, I thought the parents had to had to give the okay.
yeah, no, it's at 16. But I mean, the statements should not have been let in and admissible as evidence on a different basis, which is that they coerced this confession out of me. Now, it was not videotaped or not audio taped. There's no signed confession, just the cop's word for it. So when they came to court, they left the threat and false promise out. But even without that, I mean, there still was plenty of red flags and unusual circumstances that the judge really should not have deemed this confession to be admissible. It should not have looked at it as being voluntary. Certainly, when you waive your rights, when anyone waives their rights, whether 16 or an adult, it's supposed to be a knowing, willing, and intelligent waiver. And I was 16 years old. How could I have made an intelligent waiver? And, just my limited comprehension at the time, but then also what they were doing in order to cloud even that limited understanding. This whole Jeff is this junior detective helper theme,
Right.
did a lot to me not to understand the Miranda warnings, which would have been difficult for me to understand anyway under any circumstances.
So, okay, so they charge you, and you get an
Yeah,
attorney. Did you have a public defender, or did you have your own attorney?
public defender.
A public defender. Wow. And you know, I've heard about public defenders, and they're just, they don't do the best jobs. In a case like this, where you're being charged with murder and rape, what did this public defender do for you, if anything?
Really nothing. He rarely met with me. When I would try to explain to him that I was innocent and what happened in the interrogation room, he was always shutting me up. At one point, he told me he didn't care if I was guilty or innocent.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, which is kind of crazy because that would certainly impact the way you evaluate the case, how you investigate, what your strategy is. I mean, that certainly would be something to take into account. Uh, but beyond that, he never interviewed or called as a witness my alibi. I was actually playing wiffle ball when the crime happened. The DNA test result didn't match me before the trial, and that's when the uh, medical examiner claimed that he just remembered that he forgot to document medical evidence that he showed the victim was promiscuous, which is what opened the door for the prosecutor to argue that she must have slept with someone else before I murdered and raped her, and that was how the DNA didn't match me. And taking it a step further, he mentioned another youth by name, the second person the police had as a suspect. They claimed that, well, she slept with him, but that didn't make any sense because if that had happened that way, then first of all, there would have been seminal fluid from two people, not one. And secondly, you're supposed to try to prove what you argue, and he never got a DNA test sample from him. He never called him as a witness. He just made the unsupported argument to the jury. So my lawyer did literally asked him no questions. He didn't explain to the jury what the significance of the DNA test was. He never used that to challenge the confession. He would not allow me to testify. He should have never represented me because of a conflict of interest. So this other youth that the prosecutor was falsely saying had slept with the victim was represented by another member of that same public defender's office, and specifically by the lawyer who was supposed to be supervising him on my case. So that conflict prevented us from calling him as a witness. And really, the other thing I'll mention quickly, is that the victim's family was not coming to court, so they had no idea of what was being said about her in the courtroom, and so that was how they got away with that.
Wow. It just, you know, it's hard not to get upset when you hear about things like this, where you have, you know, police misconduct. The judge is either oblivious or looking the other way intentionally to know that he's got to know that this isn't right. What about the prosecutor? Was there any prosecutorial misconduct on their part?
Definitely. So one day before officially getting the DNA test results from the FBI lab, so he ran to the grand jury to indict me. So this way he didn't have to present that DNA evidence to the grand jury. And another thing was that this medical examiner had been complained of in neighboring counties by law enforcement for giving untruthful testimony, and he never turned over any of those complaints, which we could have used to challenge his credibility. And another thing was we found 3 cases where this prosecutor and medical examiner had worked together, where the medical examiner altered his theory in order to better fit the prosecutor's. He altered his theory to better fit the prosecutor's case. So those were all misconduct, just like arguing consensual sex without setting the proper evidentiary foundation. I mean, that was that was misconduct as well. And then later on there was they didn't allow me to get DNA testing either.
Before
Further with a data bank. But go ahead.
before we go further with your story, how is it that to this day, prosecutors who deliberately withhold information, or are they skirt around the system so that they don't have to present certain evidence and things of that nature, knowing that this would, at the very least, prove your innocence, and they can withhold that kind of? How is it that they're not in prison? How is it that they're not charged, at the very least, to say you spent 16 years in prison? Now, as a prosecutor, because you withheld this information, you deliberately sent this man to prison, knowing that he wasn't guilty. You're going to spend the next 16 years of your life in prison. How is that not a thing?
Look, instinctively, I think it should be, but there's it's that you would need to have a criminal law to that effect. But they're not charged criminally. Although you're right, they should be. But also, you're not able to sue them either. They have what's called prosecutorial immunity, and so which says that any misconduct they do, if it happens after an arrest, then they can't be sued for that. But I think that we should get rid of immunity. There has been no independent oversight until recently, but I myself and other colleagues in a coalition group called It Could Happen to You, we helped pass a law in New York that created the country's first commission on prosecutor conduct, so an independent commission. So that was new. That was the first of its kind.
That's amazing. That's a step in the right direction. But I agree with you. It's just like with the police, they're having immunity. It's not a good thing. I'm sorry, but when you put that kind of power in people's hands and say, no matter how you misuse this power, that you have immunity, you're just asking for trouble. And whether it's the cops or whether it's a prosecuting attorney, if they deliberately harm other people, they should have to pay, just like anyone else would have to pay if they were to hurt others, especially when it's something. Because I cannot emphasize this enough. Not only did he destroy you and your family and just turn your life upside down, it turned the life of the poor girl who was murdered. It turned their life upside down, the family who were still grieving, because, as you're going to tell later on, that they actually found the real person who murdered her. And there's a little twist to that. So, but before we get into that, so you went to court, and your public defender was basically useless, and so was it a jury of your peers that found you guilty?
It was.
Okay.
But there were a couple. I just want to share quickly on this point. There were a few irregularities about my trial, as if all of that wasn't enough. So, firstly, polygraph. The polygraph is not admissible as evidence because it's not reliable. I mean, often a polygraph is, first of all, it's not scientific. And sometimes, a polygraph is failed by frightened, innocent people. And so for that reason, it's not admissible in court. However, the judge he created this backdoor rule where he allowed the polygraphist to keep telling the jury that I failed the polygraph. So that certainly was prejudicial. And lastly, Yeah. Last, imagine the impact of that on the jury, right?
Right, exactly.
And then in addition to that, the there was the victim's clothes, including her bra, were admitted as evidence. And that intersected with one of the statements in the coerced false confession that that in which I said that I ripped her bra off. The jury asked to see the bra, and that's when the judge told the court, well, the bra and other clothes were left in the courtroom over the weekend, and the janitors apparently thought it was garbage because they threw it out.
Are you kidding me? So you have this evidence that's crucial to this case, and it just gets left. There's no chain
Yeah.
of command as far as who has hold of it or anything like that. And wow.
Lastly, the last thing was on the third day of jury deliberations, the jury sent out a note asking the judge, if we can't come up with a verdict, are we going to be sequestered over the Christmas holiday?
Are you kidding me?
No, and I've learned since that at that point it was 11-1 in the jury room. There was one holdout juror who thought that I was innocent, and he said that they were pressuring him. And then when that answer came back from the judge, that really amped the pressure up higher on him, and that nobody, including him, wanted to be sequestered over the Christmas holiday, and that was why he switched his vote, because they all wanted to get out of there. And
Right.
I wound up getting out of there 16 years later as a result of that. So
So
I was found guilty, and then I begged the judge to overturn the verdict because I was innocent, and I referenced the DNA, and he told me, maybe you are innocent. And he sentenced me because that was the easy way out instead of overturning the conviction.
so what was the sentence that he gave you?
15 to life, which means you have to do 15 years minimally. Then I would go to the parole board, and where it would be up to them if I was going to be paroled or not. The life part of it meant that there was never going to be a time period where they were legally obligated to release me.
Okay, so you're 17 years old, you're found
Mhm.
guilty, and you're sent to an adult prison. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so here you are, a 17-year-old kid in an adult prison. How when you got there, I can only imagine you must have been scared to death. How did you fare in prison, especially when your first days there as this young kid?
I was scared to death, and overall, prison was very difficult. I mean, it was 3 or 4 stabbings or cuttings every day. There was gang violence, and there was other violence that didn't involve weapons. So there was a general atmosphere of violence and adrenaline that permeated the air. I had this bullseye on my back. I was always worried that people would discover what I was incarcerated for, which was a rape along with that murder, because there's a vigilante mentality where people convicted of sex offenses. So over the course of 16 years, I mean, I was beat up 6 or 7 times. And, I did the best that I could, but I'm 17 years old in the men's maximum security prison.
Right.
Yeah, so the physical aspect of but it was hard to adjust to being in a cell, and I had to keep fighting off feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, thoughts of giving up, thoughts of, suicidal ideation. And half the time I couldn't even really fully believe that I was there, that all this was actually happening. The food was terrible. Sometimes it was burned. Some other times it wasn't fully cooked. They had sanctions they imposed on the prisoners if you were found guilty of breaking a prison rule. So they'd keep you in the cell 23 hours a day. They'd send you less food. Sometimes it'd be 3 or 4 days old. They'd put you in a small cage with a pull-up bar in it, maybe, if you were lucky. You could take 2 showers one week and 3 the next, rather than showering daily as the rest of the population. You could not use the phone. You could not go to the store while you were on that status. So when I was beat up, because I did the best that I could in trying to fight back, as far as the prison was concerned, I was fighting. So I was subjected to those sanctions. So the prison was hell, man. I it's kind of a miracle I survived. I had to learn all these prison survival skills and knew mores and customs. And
When so I had a question. I'm sorry. I kind of after you said that, I kind of lost my train of thought. So, what would you say to these people? Because you hear these knuckleheads out there go, "Oh, prisoners, they have it so easy. They get to work out. They have TV, they have cable. I don't have cable." But what would you say to people like that who think that prison is a walk in the park?
I would tell them it's anything but a walk in the park. It's a living hell, and there's a lot of verbal abuse by the guards. There's a lot of violence amongst the prisoners, and you really have no control over anything. You're just a number. They actually give you a number that you have to memorize. Like my number was 91AO763. And as I mentioned before about the food being terrible, and it's definitely not easy. They don't give you a cable or TV. I mean, you can purchase a TV to put in your cell in some of the prisons. You know, some of the places have cable, others don't. You would have to pay for that. But who wants to be in prison? I mean, Elmira, they gave you recreation every other night, so you would be in your cell from 5:30 at night up until 7 o'clock in the morning every other night. So no, prison's not easy, and whoever thinks that really doesn't know what they're talking about. They've not been there.
I know you said your father wasn't really in the picture that much. What was
Well,
your
yeah, I met him. I met him at some point after about 6 months after I was released. So he never came to see me in the prison. He was never involved in my life up until prison either.
what was it? What was your relationship like with your mother?
Oh, before prison or during or
Yeah, like how did this affect before prison? How did this affect her? Did she come see you? Things of that nature.
yeah. So, well, I mean, we had somewhat of a stormy relationship. But before I was arrested, I was 16 years old. That's really the age where a lot of kids are starting to assert their independence, and we think we know better than our parents do. And so I mean, there was that difficulty. In prison, I'll say she was my only consistent visitor. She used to come up a couple of times a month, but having said that, the last 5, 6 years, she came once every 6 months. My grandmother passed away while I was incarcerated. My brother came to see me 3 times in 16 years, not at all in the last decade. I had several sets of aunts and uncles, but they would come visit and then disappear for 3 years, then visit again and just repeat that. So in a lot of ways, though not literally, I mean, in a lot of ways, I did the time by myself.
Did
But it was very hard on her. Like she's told me many times that the most difficult thing in coming to see me was that when it was time to leave and she could not bring me with her, and she knew that I was innocent, that I didn't belong there, and that the prison was also dangerous. So that part of it was really difficult for her as well. And she said that the guards would take a really long time in processing visitors, and often she'd be in the visiting room waiting for me 45 minutes to sometimes 2 hours just before they would tell me that I had a visitor.
hmm. do you did your family as a whole all believe that you were innocent? Your aunts and uncles, your brother, your
They did as a whole, yes, they did. I mean, an exception to that was I had an uncle that worked in law enforcement, and they convinced him that I was guilty. So he thought that I was guilty, and his daughter did. But everybody else was convinced of my innocence. It's just that belief in my innocence did not translate into them assisting me. So they did not keep in regular contact to help me on the morale level. And there were several attempts. My mother made rounds trying to get everybody to contribute a manageable amount of money so that I could hire the necessary legal assistance that I needed, and everybody declined to participate in that.
so here you are, you enter prison at 17, pretty much a naive kid. because you
Mhm.
believe the things because and I think all of us were, who were good kids, that's just how we were. We would be naive. We would trust police. We would think, I'm doing the right thing by talking to them and helping them out and thinking that I'm actually helping them out. So you go from this naive kid to this person who starts to learn about the law and starts fighting to overturn your conviction and trying to get an appeal. What was that process? Did you have a library, like a law library or something you could go to? Were you in just indulging yourself in that as much as possible?
Yes, they had a law library, and I used to go to the law library and start, trying to learn the law, and that gave a sense of empowerment. And I used to read articles about other people who were exonerated, and I would use that as inspiration to continue. And I would study, like, what route did they take, or who helped them. So that was how I dealt with that part of it.
Now, at some point, after years of rejection, you got the attention of the Innocence Project. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I did lose 7 appeals, and I wrote. And when your appeals are exhausted, the only way back in a court is if you can find some new evidence that wasn't known before. So I began a letter writing campaign looking for an investigator or an attorney to take my case for free because I couldn't afford to hire one. And uh, I rarely got answers. I went to the parole board where, because I maintained my innocence rather than expressing remorse and taking responsibility, I got turned down for parole. And at that point, it looked like I was done. It looked like I would die in prison for a crime I didn't commit. In terms of how I wound up with the Innocence Project, one of the letters that I sent out in care of the publishing company for a book author was instead sent to Claudia Whitman, who was an investigator, and she believed in my innocence because the DNA didn't match me. And one of her ideas proved to be the winning one. She suggested I write the Innocence Project. They're a nonprofit organization out of Manhattan that works to free wrongfully convicted prisoners in those cases where DNA testing can demonstrate innocence and in which no prior testing had been conducted. So she suggested I write them. She lobbied them from outside the organization. She got other respected legal entities to also lobby them. Simultaneous to that, I also got lucky that Maggie Taylor, who worked at the Innocence Project, when the lawyers did not want to take the case because the DNA already didn't match me, she represented the case several times to them, and eventually getting them to take it. So getting their representation was the first key. Second thing was that the district attorney at the time, Janine Pirro, who was not the DA when I was convicted, but she took office before the first appeal was decided.
Wait,
It was her office that fought 7 of my appeals and
Judge
rejected me.
Bureau?
Yeah, Judge Janine Pirro. Yeah,
Fox?
Justice with Janine Pirro. On Fox, yes, one and the same.
Fought against you?
Her office fought all 7 of my appeals, blocked me from getting further DNA testing, and even got the court to throw me out because my attorney got misinformation by the court clerk, which resulted in my paperwork arriving 4 days too late. And her office argued that the court should simply rule I was late, and that's what the court did. And then I challenged that ruling in front of the U.S. Court of Appeals, where future U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor was one of the judges who heard my challenge to that, and she signed off on that ruling. And then my lawyer moved to re-argue the case in front of her and her colleague, but they again rejected that. And then the U.S. Supreme Court declined to give me permission for them.
At some point, it has, like, when I hear that, I go, they don't care about justice. They don't care about righting a wrong. They just care about their procedures and playing this game. Like, here's Janine Pirro who gets on Fox and she has this holier than thou attitude that she's all about justice, and then when a case like yours comes before her where she could actually have an effect to help you and see, that, okay, the DNA doesn't match. Let's see if this guy's innocent or not. She doesn't care. It's the
Right.
same. It's the same way with Kamala Harris. she did the same thing out in California, where she fought actively against people who were exonerated from DNA. She fought to keep them not just in prison, but to keep them, if in the cases that the ones that were on death row, to keep them on death row. As a human being, how do you do that? I don't get it. And
I definitely agree with you 100%. I mean, to hear Janine Pirro tell it, she's this, bastion of due process.
yeah,
Well, where was all that? Where was all that when you were the DA? I certainly didn't see any of that. I couldn't even get a DNA test through the DNA data bank when it was created. You knew about DNA because you would agree to an exoneration, a DNA exoneration in a different case. So you knew exactly what DNA was about. Other people were wrongfully convicted and later exonerated, but wrongfully convicted on her watch. So, it just, don't believe what you see. Just like now, I don't see her raising money for any of the organizations that are working to free innocent people or pushing justice reform. I don't see her lending her name to it or holding a fundraiser or writing a check. It's just a bunch of rhetoric that's simply reserved for the political party that she subscribes to or is a member of.
right.
That's all that it is. She's not talking about the common person, the everyday people. The same thing with, and on the other side, look, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I mean, it's hard to think of worse politicians in terms of why the justice system is really the mess that it is. So, definitely not a one party wrong thing. There's plenty of blame to go around for plenty of actors of both parties.
I agree, and I think it's because both parties have jumped on this ridiculous, assertion that, oh, we're tough on crime. So they don't care about freeing innocent people. They care about putting people in prison to look like they're tough on crime. And whether you're guilty or innocent is of little matter to them, because as you said, they don't care about the common person. They don't care about, who suffers. And to me, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I am, but I would rather see a guilty man get off free than see an innocent man go to prison. If that's what it,
100%.
then let
Yes.
that guilty man will get caught sooner or later. But you don't send anybody to prison who's innocent. And it's not just an injustice; it's immoral. It's absolutely immoral. And that these people are leaders in this country is beyond me. Like you said, it's a big part of the reason why the justice system is broken the way it is.
So getting their representation of the Innocence Project was the first key. Pirro leaving office was the second key, because her successor allowed me to have the further DNA testing that Pirro would not. And the third thing was that we got lucky that the actual perpetrator's DNA was in the database. So we took the crime scene DNA evidence, which had not matched me from the beginning, and we entered it into the data bank, and it matched the actual perpetrator, whose DNA was in that data bank because left free while I was doing time for his crime. He killed a second victim, who was a school teacher and had two children. He killed her 3.5 years later after killing the victim in my case.
Wow.
And so
if the police had decided to look beyond you and like anywhere, the possibility of them finding this guy back then would have been increased had they not just completely honed in on you, and this guy wouldn't have been able to kill a second person. But because they wanted to wrap this up in a nice neat little package and present you as their sacrificial lamb, sort to speak of, this man went on to kill another person.
yeah, that's exactly right. So on September 22nd, 2006, my conviction was overturned and I was released, reported back to court November 2nd, 2006, at which point all the charges against me were dismissed on actual innocence grounds. Whereas once the DNA matched the actual perpetrator, when he was confronted with that evidence, he confessed. So he was arrested and charged and ultimately convicted for the second murder.
Okay, so you're released. I have to ask you, and I've seen this several times, and I'm always amazed by it. How did you feel afterwards? Were you angry? Were you did you forgive? Did you have I've seen some guys who've spent 16, 18, 20 years in prison. They get out and they're just thankful that they're out, and they don't hold any animosity towards those people who were part of uh, them going to prison. I don't see how they do it. I personally don't think I could ever do that. I would have so much animosity and anger towards the police, towards the judge, towards the prosecutor, towards your defense attorney who was inept at his job. How did you feel when you came out?
So initially, I was angry, but after that was just the first week, and I realized I felt like, look, this is really destroying me, and I have to let this go. So I mean, I felt like I had uh, lost that I wanted to enjoy my life as much as I could, and I couldn't do that if I'm angry or bitter. I felt like I had lost so much as it was. Why would I want to, in effect, lose the rest of my life? If I was to be angry or bitter, it's not like I would be negatively impacting any of the people who had a hand in what happened to me. I would really be the only loser in that scenario. And so I take that, and the vehicle allows me to actualize that as I take that energy that I feel and I channel it into the advocacy work that I do. My mission in the world, and how I make sense of everything that happened to me is to free wrongfully convicted people and to do some work on the preventative side, as well as some broader criminal justice, reform work. And I take, my suffering counts for something that way, and I make sense of everything, and I have some acceptance, and I have some inner peace.
That's amazing. I am extremely happy for you that you were able to get to that point. I would hope that if that had ever happened to me, I would too. But I see how you're right. You don't want it to destroy the rest of your life. But I have to ask you, did you at least sue the hell out of the state?
100%. Yes, I did.
All right.
Yes, I did. Oh, yeah, I did. I filed a lawsuit in state court, and I also filed a civil rights lawsuit in federal court. And everybody that had a hand in it, was sued. So the Westchester County, because it was their medical examiner, City of Peekskill, because it was their police officers, the public defender, Legal Aid Society of Westchester, because it was their defense attorney, and also Putnam County, because it was their polygraphist. And I was able to settle with everybody except for Putnam County, and I went to trial with him, and I won a jury verdict against him.
Excellent. So now, was this money, did it give you the ability to go to law school and uh, get your bachelor's, your master's degree, and become a lawyer?
The short answer is yes. If I was to put a little color to that, I got a scholarship from Mercy College to finish the bachelor's degree because I had gotten the GED and got the associates in another year towards the bachelor at the time, but the funding was cut. So that it took me 5 years to get compensation. So Mercy College gave me the scholarship to finish it. That was long before I got compensation. I did get the master's degree from John Jay College, criminal justice. So, my thesis was written on wrongful conviction causes and reform. It did allow my life to normalize quite a bit because, I was released with nothing. It took 5 years to get compensated. So I lacked stability of housing. At one point, I was a couple of weeks away from the homeless shelter. And, it was very hard to get gainful employment. I was always passed over for such jobs. And I was making money as a weekly columnist, but they only wanted one article a week. And I was making money doing speaking engagements, but that's not really a consistent form of income. So getting the financial compensation gave me a certain confidence that helped me feel more like a man, like I didn't have to worry about being able to pay my bills anymore. And, I was able to take $1.5 million from that and start the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice. We've been able to free 11 wrongfully convicted people. We helped pass 3 laws aimed at preventing wrongful conviction. DNA database expansion, videotape interrogations, identification reform. Then I'm an advisory board member of the coalition group called That Could Happen to You, which the foundation is part of. And we were able to pass an additional 5 laws. So we're doing policy work in New York, Pennsylvania, and California. I'm active in all 3 chapters. At some point, it became not enough for me to sit in the front row of the courtroom. I wanted to represent some of the clients and make some of the arguments. And so I did go to law school. I did use some of that money to go to law school and become an attorney.
And so, in what area of law do you practice?
Criminal law, but I'm only interested in helping to free wrongfully convicted people, clients of my foundation. And I do a little bit of civil rights work, but that's helping people who are, once they're exonerated, to get compensated.
Okay, so if there's if there's a shining example of taking a wrong and just and making it the best that you can, you're the shining example of going, this is what life dealt me and this is what I made of it. You're an inspiration, honestly. I mean, I think you should be anybody who hears your story should be inspired by what you've done. And it's nothing less than phenomenal, seriously, and I applaud you. You briefly mentioned your foundation. A little bit slower, please tell people about your foundation, and if people want to donate to your foundation to help out, tell them where they can go and explain to them what they can do. Okay.
Sure. So we free people who are wrongfully in prison. We have a nice track record in that. We were able to get 11 people home from 2011 till now. So that's a lot. We also pursue policy changes aimed at preventing wrongful conviction. So we've been involved in helping to pass 8 laws now. 3 of them just as a standalone, and then the other 5 as part of the bigger coalition group, which we're part of, which I'm an advisory board member of, called It Could Happen to You. In terms of where people can donate, so there we do have a crowdfunding page on the website Patreon. So that's for people who are willing to be recurring monthly donors. So imagine, for example, Kurt, if 25,000 people decided that they were willing to help free wrongfully convicted people, and they were willing to sacrifice between $3 to $5 a month on a recurring basis. That would give us sounds like a little amount of money, but that many people doing it, we would give us close to $1 million, and we would be able to free more people. We would be able to hire attorneys, investigators, paralegals, other essential personnel, and we can pursue policy changes in more than just New York, Pennsylvania, and California. So people can donate there. But if you're not comfortable doing Patreon, you also can go to our website, www.deskovic.org, DESKOVIC. We do have a PayPal account there, so people can be recurring monthly donors there. Beyond donating, which we need people to do, also would be very helpful if people can help promote that on social media and word of mouth. We need to get out of my network and into the networks of many people. My ultimate goal is to have a chapter of the foundation in each state and ultimately in each country, because I really see wrongful conviction as a worldwide issue, not simply a New York problem or an American problem. And we'll be able to, but countries where we don't hear about wrongful conviction, it's not because the wrongful convictions aren't happening, it's because very few to no people are being exonerated. Nobody is doing this work, but we will only be able to expand as we're able to get public support. So if there are higher profile people, if there's celebrities or people with a large social media following, they can all, assist. If the workplace, the corporation you work for engages in corporate philanthropy, certainly making a mention, putting us on their radar would certainly, be another way that people could help.
Well, I hope that the listenership and the viewership that I have, the people tend to be very open-minded, and they look at things from different perspectives, and they're also, they're not the kind of people who believe, like, you hear these, again, these knuckleheads who'll sit there and go, well, if you don't do anything wrong, you don't have to worry about, being pulled over by the police. It's like, that's not true. That's not how the real world works. And so I think it's important that people understand that this happens way more than we'd like to admit, that people are wrongfully convicted and sent to prison, and they don't have any recourse because they don't have the money and so they're stuck with a public defender. In your case, your public defender didn't even give a damn if you were innocent or not. I mean, he just didn't care. And that's why he's a public defender. That's why he's not, working for a law firm, because he's at the bottom of the barrel. And I'm not saying all public defenders are that way, but when you
A lot of them, they're not all, but a good amount, a healthy amount of them are.
right.
And to piggyback off your point, there have been, per the National Registry of Exonerations, which catalogs exonerations across the U.S. from 1989 forward, there have been 2,805 exonerations. So those are those of us that made it out. There is a Wayne State University study that estimates 10,000 people are wrongfully convicted each year.
Wow.
19 people I did time with were exonerated either before me or after me. So imagine that, 19 people in 16 years that I knew personally.
Wow. That's, again, it boggles your mind how in this country that can be allowed, how that can even happen. And yet our legal system is that broken that this happens that frequently. And, and people they can go, well, that's not that much. Well, you know what? You let it be with someone that you love, and then see if that's not too much. Because to me, again, like I said, even one person is too much. And the system needs to be overhauled if this is.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I mean, there should be no reason why each state does not videotape interrogations, from completely from beginning to end, because coerced false confessions do cause wrongful convictions in 25% of the DNA proven wrongful convictions. And particularly vulnerable populations are youth and people with mental health issues. Misidentification is the leading cause of wrongful convictions in 75% of the DNA proven wrongful convictions. So having the best practices codified into law, and bad lawyering, is a major cause of wrongful convictions. So why not have a statewide system that is funded to the same level that the district attorney's office is funded, that has limitation of caseload, and that has the same access to experts and investigators with equal pay for both sides, because prosecutors not doing a more important job than defense attorney. They're both essential. We should have standardized evidence preservation system. And so each time somebody is exonerated, that wrongful conviction case should be studied, and each part of the system that broke down in that case should be identified, and we get legislation passed so that no one else is wrongfully convicted in the same way, at least. But we really don't see the states nor the federal government, passing all these different best practices. And so wrongful convictions can happen now, even just like they did before. DNA is only around in 5 to 12% of all serious felony cases. So, that you can't say that DNA would prevent it from now, because 88% of the time, at best, it's not available. It's not left at a crime scene.
I think it's important too, that because you just made a bunch of great points, and I think it's important that people understand it's not in the interest of our justice system to fix itself. It doesn't care if it's getting it wrong. It doesn't care how many innocent people that it sends to prison, because if it did, it would have already done something itself and changed, and enacted laws so that didn't continue happening. But they don't, because they don't care. And it's going to take people like you and people from the Innocence Project and others to push for this new legislation. And in order to do that, you need the people's support. And so all I can do is, guys, everyone out there who's listening to this, please, this is too important to just listen to the episode and then go on to the next. This is something that really needs all of us to participate in because it can happen to anybody. And I mean anybody. Jeffrey is a 16-year-old kid and gets railroaded into this. And, it could happen. It is proof that it could happen to anyone. Jeffrey, with your foundation, do you work with Innocence Project? Are they glad to see you come along and help out with the process? And or are they going, hey, you're stepping on our ground here?
Yeah, it's more the latter. Hey, you're stepping on our toes. I'm sure they would prefer that we, not exist. At the same time, we do work together on the policy side of things, and sometimes we do press conferences together, where they're arranging an event. And because remember, I'm their former client, but I also have a similar mission to organization in the same area as them. So, there is that uneasy tension, but sometimes they call me and say, look, we're doing a press conference, but, would you come? Or we're doing our annual gala dinner. You're an example of what we do. So would you come and be part of our event? And, so I do that. Yeah, but it's kind of a unusual, weird dynamic. And look, we don't necessarily agree with them on all of their policy positions either. I mean, we do advocate for some policy issues that they're silent about. That they privately agree with us, and and they never really wanted the DNA. They did not want the DNA database to be expanded, but I did because I was freed through expansion of DNA database. So to me, you want that database to be as large as you can, so long as it's only filled with people who've been convicted, so that the chances of finding the actual perpetrator, which simultaneously creates evidence of your client's innocence, you have a better chance at that. Whereas, that they didn't want the database to be to be expanded. So
I agree with you. Why would they not want it to be expanded? I would think that.
Well, their argument, their argument was, well, let them. They're not making full use of the DNA database now as it is. There's still a lot of untested rape kits, and there's not enough resources that are allocated to catalog everything. So they should try to maximize what they have first before expanding. So there was that argument, but there were some other organizations and entities. So there was the privacy argument, for example, and some people were concerned. Well, somehow or another, these health insurance companies were going to get access to the DNA database, and they're going to be able to determine who has a genetic predisposition to one illness or another, and so people may not be insured, or they might their premiums may be higher. But to me, the answer, that's not a reason not to expand it. That just means it should be illegal for insurance company. The public shouldn't have access to that general database. It's not a reason not to have it. But then there was also like a civil libertarian argument, I'll refer to it as, which says that well, this is going to be, since the expansion at the time had to do with misdemeanors. And so the argument was that, well, because there's selective law enforcement, and that means the majority of the DNA samples are going to be taken from the minority community, and therefore it's discriminatory. And, my pushback argument to that is that it's not discriminatory. If there's selective enforcement, which I know that there is, the issue is to stop having selective enforcement. It's not, let's not do the database. And if someone is really that concerned about their privacy, maybe they shouldn't do anything illegal. So don't get convicted of something, assuming it's not a wrongful conviction for a minute. Your privacy argument, or you don't want your DNA collected, well, then don't commit the crime. Obviously, that doesn't apply to if you're guilty. But that would be my pushback argument to that. But listen, on that one, I kind of, the foundation, we got our way. That was the opposite position of what the Innocence Project wanted. I took some gruff, I took some flack from them, from many other places. But hey, I acted on my conscience, and I did the right thing. And Kurt, I want to expand on that theme for a second, just in general. So The then Westchester District Attorney, Janet D. Fiore, who is now the chief judge of the New York Court of Appeals. So she did the right thing for me. She allowed me to get the testing. She agreed to overturn the conviction once it did not, once it matched the actual perpetrator. She agreed to dismiss the charge on actual innocence grounds. Her office arrested and convicted the actual perpetrator. She had my case studied by 4 different experts who issued a report on what went wrong. So she did the right thing for me. I wouldn't, I might have been home, might not have been, but it was an easier and faster route with her. But that having been said, I've been critical of her in print in my capacity as a columnist and as an advocate. So, she often portrays herself as this crusader against wrongful conviction, but unfortunately, her body of work in the area of wrongful convictions begins and ends with my case. Now, she never supported any of the anti-wrongful conviction legislation. Her office never agreed to any exonerations. They fought cases, Selwyn Days, Keon Katibi, people that had also been wrongfully convicted under Janine Pirro. D. Fiore's office unsuccessfully fought to try to uphold those wrongful convictions, and eventually they were exonerated. They are listed in the registry. So when she got the nomination for chief judge of Court of Appeals, with my name and my case being thrown around as support of it, I wrote a letter of opposition. I asked to testify at the hearing, which they did not let me. So I did a written submission, and then I also had an attorney make a follow-up submission. So I didn't do what the police do. I didn't look the other way. She didn't get a free pass. 100% appreciate what you did for me, but you're supposed to fight wrongful convictions, right? All day, every day, even weekends and holidays. I'm not looking the other way, and there's too much of that. I view justice reform as being about accuracy and justice, not anti-law enforcement. That having been said, and I think that both of those professions are really essential. But that having been, so I'm not against cops and prosecutors, but I am against rogue cops. I am against rogue prosecutors. Okay, I reject the idea that it's a few bad apples. No, it's a hell of a lot more than that. Okay, we wouldn't see all the brutality. We wouldn't see the unjustifiable deadly police force shootings caught on camera, people getting away with it. We wouldn't have the 2,805 exoneration. So it's not a few bad apples. Stop saying that. You lose credibility. But at the same time, it's also not everybody either. So I kind of position it that way, and I've gotten some buy-in from some segments of law enforcement. So in the last 7.5 years, I have been able to co-teach the ethics class at a police academy in Jersey. I did serve on the transition team of the new Westchester District Attorney, helping to write memos and recommendations for her conviction review unit. I did serve on the Peekskill Police Task Force Reform Group, which issued a report on improved policing, and I was able to work on that subcommittee with the Peekskill Police Chief and the county police officer and retired cop. So, I try to pitch it that way. You can get more cooperation, and really, it is about accuracy. I just want people to be held accountable. And look, if I call 911, I don't want to be on hold. I don't want a sociologist or a psychologist showing up. Okay, so no, I don't support defund the police, but I do support increased training for the police, and I 100% advocate holding accountability. And I don't think any of those positions are contradictory.
I agree with you 100%. I think you hit it right on the head, and I think that when you're in these positions, whether it's a judge, whether it's a prosecutor, whether it's a police officer, you have to have integrity. And if you've impugned your integrity for any reason, whether it's to further your career, whether it's to push a certain narrative, whatever it may be, I think you should step down. I don't think that you should hold any of those positions if you don't have the integrity to hold them. And unfortunately, like you said, it's not just a few bad apples. And we're not talking about just police officers. We're talking about prosecutors. We're talking about judges. We're talking about bad faith actors in all these areas. and the people who suffer are the community. It's people of the community who suffer because of it. Um, did you ever get a chance to see the two police officers, the good cop, the bad cop, that who forced this false confession? Did you ever get to see them after the fact? Did they ever apologize?
Yes. No, they did not apologize. Well, I saw them within the setting of, I mean, when I sued them, I mean, when it was time for them to be deposed, I mean, I came to the deposition. I mean, it was my turn now to ask the questions. Albeit through my attorney. So I was not going to miss that. You're not supposed to, talk with them. I mean, I admit that I did kind of break decorum on that when I saw the good cop, and I kind of lost it a little bit. I said, "Yo, man, you cost me 16 years of my life." I just, and his answer was, "I didn't cost you anything."
Wow.
But the thing that infuriated, I never got an apology from anybody that was involved in my case, and everybody, all those different entities that I sued, that I referenced to you about, all of them admit that I was innocent, except for those two detectives, right? Even their lieutenant that oversaw everything admits that I was innocent. But those two detectives, and this kind of like added insult to injury. So before they settled with me, they actively litigated against me for 5 years. And their defense, in a nutshell, prior to settling, was Deskovic is guilty, and therefore we did nothing wrong.
Right.
So there was this following. You tell me what you think about this, Kurt. There was this following colloquy took place between my lawyer and these two detectives. So one at a time, but the colloquy was the same. So you say that my client was guilty, right? Yes. You know that the DNA didn't match him, right? Yes. You know that the DNA did match another person, right? Yes. You know that other person killed a second victim after that, right? Yes. Do you have an explanation for how this 29-year-old's DNA ended up into the 15-year-old victim? No. Do you still say that my client is guilty? Yes.
Wow. And didn't you say that he also confessed to the killing?
He did.
So
He did.
so how can they say that you're still guilty when this guy confessed and said, "Yes, I committed this crime"? What to see to
Well,
me, those two people have no integrity. They have no honor, and they should be shunned. They should be, if they were still police officers or detectives, they should have been immediately fired and ridiculed and publicly, because you have no honor, and you are holding a position in society that mandates that honor is part of it. You have to be an honest person, and for you to be able to sit there and still say after the fact that you're guilty when they know damn well you're not, infuriates me. Uh,
yeah.
I don't even.
I agree with you completely. So the only last point on that subject, I'll say, at one point the good cop, I guess he got tired of answering questions along that line with my lawyer, and so he says, "Look, I don't even know who this other person is. I don't know even know who the." So that was his thing, right? And then the other cop, the bad cop, I guess he got exasperated, I guess, right? And so kind of like in this fake righteousness, he said finally he had enough in his mind. When he had enough, right? He says, "Look, the only false confession in this case was given by Stephen Cunningham, the actual perpetrator." Could you imagine saying that? His answer for that confession of the actual perpetrator, his answer to that is that was a false confession. That
Wow.
the actual perpetrator, there was DNA it matched, that was a false confession.
I don't even know how either one of them could look themselves in the mirror and be able to even, and not just be ill with disgust at who they are. Honestly, I just don't know how you can look at yourself in the mirror when you're that type of person. And I hope they, karma's a bitch, as they say, and I hope karma comes around and gives them exactly what they deserve. Because if you're that, not not only when you're that stupid, and that you refuse to admit that you had did anything wrong, and they refuse to admit that you turned a young kid's life upside down because your desire to you know to get the criminal at all costs, to make yourself look good as if you can do your job, which obviously they were not very good at. I have no, I just have nothing for them. Nothing. At a loss for words right now, because I get this way when I get angry, when I go, because I'm preventing myself from cursing. So, but that's what I want to do, because people like that have no business ever being police officers or detectives. So I'm so glad that your story had a happy ending. I'm Again, I cannot say enough wonderful things about you, that what you've done with your life, with your foundation. And I truly hope that my listeners, my viewers, will take heed and help you in your cause and freeing other innocent people, and realize that this isn't just something that happens occasionally. This is something that happens way, way, way too often. So again, thank you for everything that you've done and for becoming the person that you've become. It's you Your mother must be very proud. That's all I can say.
She is. She definitely is. And those words make me feel good, and your encouragement to continue down the path. And if I can share a tool with listeners, and for terms of formula I use, which I extract from my story, both incarcerated and then overcoming challenge of reintegration and getting through law school, it would be have a goal, have a realistic plan. You should be able to look at the plan 3 or 4 different ways and see that how it could potentially work. Be flexible. Remember that the goal is the goal. The plan's not the goal. So if an unexpected door opens for you, or another way to move closer to your plan happens, then as long as it's moving in that direction, as long as you're not uncomfortable, then go ahead and do that. Remember that there are no reasons why you can't accomplish something. There are reasons why something may be more difficult, but no reason why you can't accomplish it. Don't be afraid of hard work. If you really, how bad do you actually want something? I mean, to quote a sports metaphor, leave it all out on the field, and never give up. Never give up. And when you can't go any further, just say to yourself, this might be the key moment where I was on the verge of a breakthrough, but because I quit, it's not going to happen. So even though I can't continue, I'm going to continue anyway, just to see what happens on the other side. And when you do get through, reach back for somebody that's in the same position as you, do some work on the preventative side. And if you do that, then your suffering can count for something. It can be healing, it can be meaningful, it can be cathartic, it can help the world to be just a little bit of a better place. And I know that lesson can apply to situations beyond incarceration, wrongful conviction. It can apply to sexual assault victim. It can be applied to a domestic violence survivor. It could apply to someone who's been homeless, someone who suffered discrimination or racism, or somebody who overcame some debilitating illness that they said that they'll never recover from. And whatever scenario you want to put on, however huge, however lesser, relative to all the other things that can apply to that.
Those are powerful words of wisdom, Jeffrey. Powerful words of wisdom. And I want you to give one last piece of advice before we go. What would you tell people, not just from your experience, but as an attorney? What would you tell anybody who had to meet with the police and were asked questions? What would your advice be to them?
Oh, that's an easy one, actually, but very informative, very helpful. Yeah. So you give your name and where you're from. and you ask for an attorney. There's nothing that they need to talk to you about that's that urgent that can't wait for you to get an attorney. The attorney will level the playing field. They'll prevent them from overreaching you, from coercing you. They won't be able to do to you what they did to me. Now, the innocence of suspects often works against them because they think, well, if I'm not guilty of anything, I don't know anything, then what can possibly go wrong if I speak to the police without an attorney? But as you've heard today, actually quite a bit can go wrong. Another concern that innocent people have is they worry, well, how is that? Am I going to look guilty? How is that going to look if I ask for an attorney? Push past that thought. You need to get the attorney. There's a reason why you have that right. And on a similar basis, if the police ask to search your car, do not let them search the car. But your way of not letting them do it is by not agreeing to it. So give them plenty of space, be as not threatening, but just, officer, I'm not consenting to you search my car. So if you search my car anyway, you're doing it against my will. Just verbally say that, and then let them do what they're going to do. And you can take it up in court later, but sometimes it's gone wrong where people have agreed to let police officers search their vehicle, and all of a sudden drugs that weren't there are suddenly found in the vehicle. So that's a similar thing. I would never let a police officer search my car or my house. But again, the way of not letting them do it is not physically resisting in the moment, because you're going to get yourself killed or hurt very badly if that happens. You just be another statistic and another momentary story. So you make clear you're not agreeing, but you step back and let them do it. Just make clear verbally, I'm not agreeing to you to search it. So if you search it, you're doing it without my consent. That would be the way to handle all of those things. And if you're a parent, it's essential that you teach your children what to do in either of those situations. Remember, I was 16. There have been people even younger than me, 15, 14, that have been coerced in a false confession. So it really is an important life survival skill that you need to teach children, right up there with don't hitchhike and don't talk to strangers. It's right up there with that, and very, very important for people to serve on jury duty. It's one of the highest callings that a civilian can do other than voting. So many people try to get out of jury duty. And that's why we wind up with people that are on juries that really are not all that scrutinizing of a prosecutor's case. Hold them to their burden of proof. There's a reason why that's the law. And if they don't prove it, or if you think the defendant did it, but they hasn't been proven, then you're supposed to be found not guilty. Now, if they prove beyond reasonable doubt, then you know what to do. But there's too many of us that don't serve on juries, and there's too many of us that don't vote. It makes a difference who's in office. So if people that don't support justice reform, let's vote them out of office. Vote for whoever's running against them of either party. Look, the Democrats do not have justice reform. That's not a Democratic issue. They don't have that on lock. There's plenty of them that oppose things as well. So I vote candidate. I vote blank. I don't vote on party basis. So that means sometimes I'm pulling the levers for both people. But we all need to do that. Exactly. And we all need to do that. So
that's a great words of advice, honestly. Jeffrey Deskovic, you, sir, are an amazing man. I am so honored, and I am pleasured to have you on my show. And thank you for being a part of this and telling your story. And again, you're an inspiration. I hope you never forget that. It's not just what you went through. It's what you've done with your life. It's this foundation that you created, and to, as you would say, pay it forward. And you should be applauded. So I'm grateful for people like you. So thank you.
Your words mean a lot. I appreciate you sharing your platform with me so I can speak with your listeners. And if you like what you've heard today, there is a documentary short out about me on Amazon Prime called Conviction. It's about my life post exoneration, the advocacy work. So please check that out as well.
Yes, definitely. All right. And before we go, I'm going to post all your links to your website and everything, but tell people how they can reach you one more time, how they can donate to your foundation, any social media you have, give them that. And like I said, I'll make sure we post it as well. So if they don't write it down, they'll be able to just click on it. So, okay.
Yep. So the website is www.deskovic.org. That's Deskovic. On social media, I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. There is a public figure page on Facebook. So I do share all my interviews and advocacy work and media appearances and upcoming events and just wrongful conviction and justice reform articles in general. So definitely a way to learn about all these issues that way. In terms of donating, there is a website on Patreon. Just Google Patreon Deskovic Foundation, and our page will come up. And would appreciate if you could donate there rather than through PayPal, so other people could see it. And everybody piles on, and everyone wants to be with a winner, so it can help that way and help share it as well verbally and on social media. And to reassure people, look, I work 50 to 60 hours a week. I'm doing this. I don't get paid. It's a labor of love. It's my passion. It's my life. I'm able to earn a living just from dividends and interest that I earn off the compensation that I get. So my point is that 100% of everything will always go to freeing wrongfully convicted people and pushing the policy changes. So none of it will ever make its way into my pocket under any line of reasoning. So just want to, we're in a day and age where scams are all the time, and we stand in marked contrast to that. So not only do I not get paid for this, but it's actually cost me money to do it. But I want to be able to free additional people. While we have 10 active cases, we have another 7 that are active, but are just in a wait mode. We don't have the capacity to push them. And, there's several hundred of raw cases just waiting to be screened. There's people in other states who we can't do the work at yet. So getting public support is critical.
I hope all you guys out there, you take what this gentleman has said and see that he's the real deal, and find it in your heart to donate, whether it's a few bucks or whatever you can donate to help his cause and to help to make sure that we don't have innocent people who sit in prison for the rest of their life just simply because they didn't have the means to an expensive attorney and got stuck with a public defender or were railroaded by the police or a prosecuting attorney who was looking to further their career. So again, Jeffrey, thank you so much. Again, you're just an amazing man, and I'm glad that we have people like you in this world. So thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, folks, thanks a lot. This was one of those shows that just drains you. It takes it because of everything the emotions that you go through. So, but
yeah,
I'm really glad it was a great show, and I'm glad we did it. So,
me too.
So until next time, you guys take care, be safe, and follow Jeffrey's advice. If you get pulled over, just give him your name and ask for an attorney. So, okay.
Okay.
Until
Great.
next time,
Thank you.
take care. Bye.